everyone, welcome to this video for my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm Caro Herrera, and today I'm going to be reviewing Rogue One, a movie that belongs in the Star Wars universe. It's set right before episode 4, and it's the first of a series of spin-offs that are going to be made over the years. Some of the people in the cast of Rogue One are Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, Mads Mikkelsen, and Forest Whitaker, among many others. There is a novelization of Rogue One written by the famous James Luceno. I've only read the parts where Darth Vader appears though, because I personally only like to read Star Wars novels if they have some of the Skywalker family members really involved in the plot. But anyways, I want to dedicate this video to the amazing, one-of-a-kind Carrie Fisher. It was fantastic that the last glimpse we saw of Princess Leia was in Rogue One saying the word hope. It was a sort of very fitting goodbye because the first time the world saw Princess Leia was minutes after we see her in Rogue One. Apart from her role in Star Wars, Carrie Fisher will be deeply missed because she was such a courageous and strong woman, definitely a role model. I should also say that this video could not have been made without the help and support of my dear friend, the Far Bright Center, whom I'm going to be referring to in this video as TFBC. I'm going to tell you the reasons for this later on. But before I begin, I should make two things clear. This will be a video with spoilers, and my favorite character in the whole Star Wars universe is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, so I'm going to be talking a lot about him here. Something curious happened with me regarding Rogue One. Back when The Force Awakens came out, I thought it was okay, but I didn't really analyze it. I even made some reviews for it and for its novelization. But I've had more than a year now to really think about it, and now I loathe The Force Awakens. I can't even consider it to be a sequel to the Star Wars saga, so it's not canon for me. Anyways, I felt really let down by Disney because of this, so I was very hesitant regarding Rogue One. I was sure I would hate it, but despite all this, I had to see it because I wanted to have some solid arguments backing up my dislike for it, if that makes sense. And if you're wondering why I felt so strongly about Rogue One, it was because when I heard that Vader was going to be in it, I was really scared. I feared that they would use him as this sort of pop culture villain stereotype without making justice to that real tragedy of his character arc. I feared Rogue One would be this sort of ode to the side of Anakin Skywalker when he's Vader, the mass murderer who relishes only in inflicting pain without pointing out that he's a complex character and there is way more to him than that. And with all of this in mind and more, I went to see Rogue One. Since I love spoilers, I already knew what was going to happen, but I think that I was so afraid reading what was going to occur that I sort of didn't understand. I thought that Vader was going to kill off some people that in the end he doesn't end up killing, the main characters. As I sat in the movie theater, I am afraid to confess I wasn't really paying that much attention to what was going on. I went with a mindset to judge, and that's what I did. And when the film finished, I was angry for several things. For example, where they had decided Vader to live on Mustafar of all places in the Tower of Mordor version 2. I thought it was this sort of unnecessary link to an iconic bad guy, Sauron from Lord of the Rings. But I was really happy, though it was painful, that the first glimpse we saw of Vader was of him as Anakin without his suit inside the Bacta tank. As a side note, I think this is going to be an extended scene when the DVD Blu-ray comes out. But the reason why I liked this was because they were making emphasis on the physical pain Vader suffers and to the fact that he can get out of his suit. And this aspect of his life is something that I'd only ever encountered in comics. But then again, I hated how no one was talking about that scene regarding Rogue One. They were all focusing when he's killing off people. But anyways, I hope that the fact that the first time we saw Vader after the events of Twilight of the Apprentice, the second season's final episode for Star Wars Rebel, was of him without his suit, was just pure Anakin, because it could be sort of a parallel to the fact that the last time we saw him was in Twilight of the Apprentice, when Ahsoka Tano breaks a part of his mask and we get a glimpse of Anakin after all those years as Vader. Moving on, I actually didn't have a problem with the scene between Vader and Orson Krennic, the bad guy of Rogue One, but I was really angry when he was killing off those rebels at the end. Sure, I thought it was iconic and everything, that whole scene, but I didn't really like how people were sort of idolizing him for it, and yet some would readily dismiss, misunderstand, or ignore Anakin Skywalker's character and only focus on Darth Vader, the killer. In short, I saw the film, I didn't like it, and I didn't even analyze why I didn't. But then I started talking with the Far Bright Center about it, and for several reasons which I shall later on mention, I actually ended up changing my mind about Rogue One. I went inside again, and now I like it. If you've seen A New Hope, you know that one of the main storylines deals with the Rebel Alliance trying to destroy the first Death Star. They know how to do this because they have the construction plans for the spaceship. And in Rogue One we see how it is exactly that the rebels got to steal the construction plans of the Death Star from the Empire. But of course Rogue One deals with other stuff too. For example, we get a lot of insight into how the Death Star construction came about. We get details into the behind the scenes of the Empire. We also see how the Rebel Alliance worked. In Rogue One, the protagonist is Jyn Erso, daughter of Galen Erso, one of the masterminds behind the construction of the Death Star. He is forced into doing this though. In order to keep his daughter safe from the Empire, he hides her and they part ways. When Jyn grows up, one thing leads to another and she ends up joining the Rebel Alliance because she wants to contact her father and because they want to contact him so they can get the construction plans of the Death Star. And in the process, Jyn makes friends with some of the Rebel Alliance members and with other now iconic characters. And we even get to see the famous Saw Gerrera, who is a character from the Clone Wars, the fantastic animated series. In the end, the rebels manage to get the construction plans, although all of them die, and Rogue One ends just before A New Hope. I give Rogue One a 5 out of 5 stars review. Some initial reviews claim that it was the best Star Wars film out there, and though I really like it now, I can't agree with this. While I highly recommend it and think it's a great story, it cannot compare to the majesty that's the Star Wars saga. But in a way, Rogue One doesn't claim to outshine either the prequels or the original trilogy. Or to quote Mulder Churcher, a person who wrote a great essay called Star Wars, the creation of a modern myth, cultural influence, fan response, and the impact of literary archetypes on saga perception. This is what the author of this media has to say about Rogue One. Rogue One does not claim to be part of the saga. It exists without intentionally and altering facts crucial to the plot of the myth. It exists as a supportive side note only. The writers of Rogue One did not fall victim to the same hubris that haunts Abrams and Disney. Rogue One knows exactly what it is. It is C-canon, continuity to be utilized or ignored at whim, or as needed. It is a Star Wars story, not Star Wars itself. Anyways, moving on, and before I start talking about Vader in this movie, since I am a big Clone Wars fan and Star Wars Rebels fan, I love those nods to these animated series that we saw in Rogue One, for example, Saw Gerrera from Clone Wars, or we also get to see in a scene the droid Chopper. We even see in the final battle the spaceship The Ghost, that's from Star Wars Rebels. But anyways, there isn't much about Rogue One that I would change if I had the chance. Maybe I would have included a little kiss between Jyn and Cassian, but that's just a romantic in me. I thought it was really cool to have Chirrut. Before watching Rogue One, I thought Chirrut was going to be an attempt to copy Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels. I was really happy to see that Chirrut wasn't even a Jedi, and yet he trusted in the Force so much, even though he wasn't a Force-sensitive creature. And this was really cool because he had so much faith in the Force in a time where, for example, there are people like Han Solo out there who think the Force is a lot of hocus pocus. So it reminds us that the Jedi's memory still lingers in the minds of the galaxy. Still a very present thing. It's not only a legend of long ago, a myth. And one of the things that the Far Right Center liked about Rogue One, and which I would like to quote, is the following. The entire film is taking place against the backdrop of a father-daughter tale, in which the father's contribution to the Empire is negated, and the father himself redeemed by the persistence, faith, love, and heroic actions of his child. And so, always we have in the back of our minds the story of Luke and Anakin/Vader. Not to mention the fact that all of this is taking place mere minutes from the beginning of A New Hope, sort of. It changes the feeling behind the entire scene. I mean, one can easily view these as Vader's last hurrah, so to speak. One of the last times when he's operating completely under Sidious's fed light, that everything from his past, and thus the entire identity of Anakin Skywalker along with it, is completely lost. Because in just a short while, a certain Luke is about to burst into the scene. And as we know, Luke's mere presence in Vader's life will begin the process of tearing open the crack in the prison fortress of his armor, left behind by Ahsoka Tano in Twilight of the Apprentice. The process of freeing his true self once and for all. And now, with all of this in mind, I think it's fitting to start talking about Anakin/Vader's appearance in Rogue One. I mentioned earlier how I didn't like him living in this dark tower because it was a link to a villain in literature, Sauron from Lord of the Rings. But then the Far Right Center discovered that this was actually an idea from the original trilogy. So the fact that maybe George Lucas wanted this for Vader, and it's not just some new stuff that Disney is coming up with, made me appreciate it and get used to it. And to quote TFBC, I could not help but be reminded of the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars, at the beginning of which Anakin approaches a looming dark tower, wherein sits enthroned the mysterious figure known as the Father, a powerful Force wielder who is neither Jedi nor Sith, but so much more. I can easily imagine him hiding away in his tower, licking his wounds after his shattering encounter with Ahsoka Tano, or brooding upon his many losses, shrouding himself within the all-consuming power of the dark side. And after thinking about all of this even more, I have to admit that the idea of Vader shutting himself up in that big, lonely dark tower is strangely appealing, like something out of a high fantasy or dark fairy tale. Along with lending him this almost otherworldly quality, it also highlights his aloneness and makes him feel somehow removed from the rest of the Empire, as though he may be one of the most powerful tools of the Empire, but is still somehow not entirely contained by it. I'd been expecting them to show us Vader's military general's side, but instead they focused on his otherness, and as a result, he came across almost as this dark semi-god, which is quite fascinating really, especially because it casts the line from A New Hope about Lord Vader and his sorcerer's sway into a whole new light. I found the Dark Tower thing very evocative and even a bit romantic, in a dark way. In fact, it's actually quite interesting to think about him refueling himself in the dark side by staying there, as if the entire place is torture for him and makes him angry enough to be the weapons he needs to be. Moving on, regarding how this Dark Tower is on Mustafar of all places, where Anakin lost and suffered so much, where he was at his lowest point, I had a hard time understanding why they would put him there, but then TFBC pointed out several things. For example, it creates a powerful visual link between the final scenes of Episode 3 and A New Hope, and then I've always hated depictions of Vader that show him on Coruscant during the dark times. Too many memories of Amidala and whatnot. So oddly, if one had to see him in a familiar location, I'd actually rather it be Mustafar, because Mustafar is just plain full of horror either way you look at it, so it's not going to be tarnished in that way. Mustafar has always been very symbolic of hell, a literal hell, and also the hellishness of his existence. I like to think that the fires of hell are more bearable for him than such memories than Coruscant holds. Moving on to the scene where Vader is talking to director Krennic. As I said earlier, it was alright for me from the start, and I now think that the famous line, "Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, director," is just something cheeky Anakin would say, but then again, I like it because it could also be something everyone who doesn't like the sequels could say to J.J. Abrams, the director of The Force Awakens. Then comes the iconic scene of Vader killing the rebels who are trying to keep the constructions of the Death Star away from him. When the first time I saw it, as I mentioned earlier, I thought it was really upsetting to see these single-handed murders, because so many people relish the thought of Vader being a killer. But when you come to think of it, at least in the films, we don't really see Vader killing anyone with a lightsaber. Only Obi-Wan, but that's a bit ambiguous. And thus, I could not agree more with the Far-Right Center when she says this. For the past year since The Force Awakens, I have felt deeply concerned that Disney is continuing to portray Darth Vader as a villain without also giving due screen attention to Anakin Skywalker. In the prequel trilogy and original trilogy, George Lucas created a very particular balance between both sides of this character, and I am very wary of anyone tipping that balance too far, especially when it seems to be in the direction of Vader rather than Anakin. To favor Vader has always seemed too much like a purely commercial move, and thus lucrative. The slaughtering of the rebel crew was upsetting, but not in a way that I could not handle. It was fascinating actually that Vader was acting alone, like he seemed very alone in this film, removed from everyone else, visually especially. Despite having witnessed Vader slaughtering people in this scene, in the end it's a sort of memorable goodbye to his evilness, because just as the Far-Right Center puts it, the fact that the film ends not with Vader's slaughter of the rebels, but with his very own rebel daughter standing poised and ready to make away with the stolen plans, says it all. And one final thing, I agree with the Far-Right Center with the following. The shot of him standing with his dark cloak billowing about to board the rebel ship was just as memorable as his now iconic entrance atop his TIE fighter in Star Wars Rebels Season 2 Twilight of the Apprentice. I guess that for the moment this is all I have to say about Rogue One. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and please, whether you agree with me or not, let me know, because I would love to discuss Rogue One with you. I want to thank my dear friend the Far-Right Center for everything. You can find a link to her blog on Tumblr in the description box below, as well as a link to the film's IMDb page. I'm Carrera, the Mental Traveler, and may the Force be with you.